Now, the next one I find really interesting. You see, Surah 32:3 says that Muhammad is a warner to a people who have never been warned before. The problem is that the Quran already said that Ishmael was a messenger and a prophet, and he actually did things to teach people how to follow God. So how can Muhammad be of the line of Ishmael when he's from a people that have never had a prophet? When according to the Quran, the Ishmaelites already had one, Ishmael.
Then he brings up the Quran in chapter 32 verse 3, where it says that Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, is a warner to the people to whom no warner has come before. And then the Quran in chapter 19 verses 54 to 55 says that Ishmael was a messenger and a prophet, and he told people, or he urged the people to pray and give tax. Now, you have got to be slow. You have got to be slow. Okay? Because do you even know the gap of time between Ishmael and Muhammad? Approximately 2,650 years is the gap between these two people. Ishmael lived around 2050 BC, and our prophet was born 570 AD. These are not the same people who received a warner. There were 20 prophets between Muhammad and Ishmael, peace be upon them both. That's 20 warners. So again, no contradiction. Chapter 32 verse 3 is talking about Quraysh and the Arabs of the Hijaz, meaning that Muhammad was the first warner that came to them, because no other warner had come to those specific people. But if you go back 2,000 plus years, chapter 19 verse 54 and 55, Ishmael was a messenger to his people. And his message did not continue among his people's descendants either. So Arabs later, they broke off and they fell into paganism. And then the forefathers of Quraysh, who actually had no warners, they actually had a warner, which was the Prophet Muhammad. And he was the first one to warn them, because they were a group who had no warner before our Prophet. So again, no mistake, just your lack of knowledge of history.
This next one I just thought was interesting. According to Surah 2:221, Muslims aren't allowed to marry idolatrous women, those who are polytheistic, right, worshiping false gods. Surah 9:30, really, Surah 9:27 through 33, condemns Christians and Jews for worshiping, Ezra as the son of Allah and Jesus as the son of Allah. And in context, we can look at verse 27 and verse 33 to see that they're talking about polytheism. They're connecting that to the Jews and the Christians, which would make them idolatrous in the eyes of Muslims. Yet in Surah 5:5, it's permissible for Muslims to marry those given of the scriptures before you, the Jews and the Christians. This would be a contradiction. It says you can't marry idolatrous women. It calls Jews and Christians idolatrous, and yet you're still allowed to marry them. Contradiction.
Then he brings up the Quran in chapter 2 verse 221, which says do not marry the polytheists. Then he brings Quran chapter 9 verses 27 to 33, where God calls the Jews and the Christians who have taken men to be sons of God as polytheists. Again, not all Jews and Christians, just a specific group of the two. And then he brings Quran 5:5, where it permits marriage with chaste women from the people of the book, which are the Jews and the Christians. And he's trying to say, look, the Quran is showing a contradiction. My brother, you're just embarrassing yourself here. Okay, let's analyze these verses and see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying. The Quran distinguishes between the mushrikun, firstly, right? The Arab pagan idolaters. It's those tribes that worshipped idols like Hubal, Lat, Uzza, Manat, etc. Also, they denied prophets, they denied revelation, they denied resurrection, and they fought against the prophet. That's who the Quran is referring to when it says the polytheists. The Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book, meaning the Jews and the Christians, those who believed in revelation, they believed in previous scriptures, they believed in earlier prophets, so it's not the same people. And now mushrik, meaning a polytheist, has two senses within the Quran. The first one is pagan idol worship, and the second one is believing men to be divine. That's two separate categories of polytheists. And the Quran in chapter 2 verse 221, it refers to the pagan polytheists only, not Jews and Christians. And the Quran in chapter 5 verse 5, it permits marriage with believing Jewish and Christian women. Not polytheists, believing. The word believing is in the verse. So that is a different category altogether. Then we have the Quran in chapter 9 verse 29, which says, fight until they pay the tax. You see, this tax is not allowed for pagans. So clearly, you can't put Christians and Jews and the polytheists in the same category, because the Jews and the Christians paid the tax. Pagans weren't allowed to pay this tax. That shows you they're not the same. And even the commentaries of chapter 2 verse 221, they say that this refers to Arab pagans who worshipped idols and not the people of the book, meaning the Jews and Christians. So again, no contradiction, just your lack of knowledge and misunderstanding.
The next two are actually contradictions between different versions of the Arabic Qurans. One example is in Surah 37:12, where in the Hafs Quran, it says that you wonder while they mock, referring to the Prophet, or in the Khalaf version, it says, but I wonder while they mock, referring to Allah.
Then we've got the Quran in chapter 37 verse 12, and he says this is Hafs version, which says you wonder, and then the Khalaf version, which says I wonder. Okay. Ajibtu and Ajibta, that's the two different words that he's trying to portray, but they both refer to the same thing. that the disbelievers rejecting and mocking resurrection. So the meaning and the context in both these versions are the same. One is from the prophet's perspective and one is from God's perspective. However, both of them are amazed at the same thing, which is the amazement of the disbelievers. So again, no contradiction.
Another example is in Surah 2, 125. In the Hafs version, it says, you shall take, referring to the standing place of Abraham as a place for prayer. But in the Warsh version, it says, they have taken the place of Abraham. This is clearly a contradiction. You can't do something in the future and the past at the same time.
And then he brings up the Quran in chapter 2, verse 125, and it's basically you take versus they take. Again, my brother, I don't know if you're slow or something, but I don't know. You take, the verse shows a command from God. Meaning what? That you take that place of prayer, the place of Abraham. That's where you should pray after you've circumambulated around the house of God. And then the other version says they took, which shows how earlier believers already took these places of worship. So the Warsh gives historical evidence to the Hafs, not contradictions. So the ruling of prayer is the same in both contexts. A contradiction would be if God, for example, said in one, pray at this place, and then in the other one said pray behind it, or pray away from it, or pray somewhere far distant from this location. That's the meaning of a contradiction. You don't even know the meaning of a contradiction. So far you haven't done anything. This entire video has been refuted. You haven't been able to prove a single contradiction within the Holy Quran. I think maybe you need to go look up the word contradiction in the dictionary, understand what it means, and then come back.